Absolutely. So Rudy Valdez is the director of the very intimate documentary, The Sentence, on HBO, which is up at the Emmys for exceptional merit in documentary filmmaking. Rudy, I have to ask first off, how did this whole thing start out? Was it always intended to be a documentary, or were you just like filming for Cindy to be able to see her children?
Yeah, that's exactly how it started. You know, I wasn't a filmmaker when I started making this film. I don't even really know what I was doing at the beginning, in the sense of I started filming just, I don't know if it was out of instinct, it came from me wanting to capture moments in my sister's daughters' lives, my niece's lives, so that one day when I figured out, you know, how to get Cindy home, or whenever she came home, I wanted her to be able to see her children, to see the things that she was going to miss, you know, first days of school, first dance, you know, first steps, laughing and fighting and living and running and playing. You know, she was going to have these visits and she was going to have phone calls, but she was going to miss a lot of these other things. And I wanted, to the best of my ability, to be able to give her that. And I didn't intend for it to be a documentary at first, but something happened a few months in. I happened to be home, you know, during this entire time I was living in New York City, and I would fly home whenever I could to try and capture these moments. And I flew back to capture her oldest daughter, Autumn's first dance recital, because I knew it was something that Cindy would want to be able to experience, not just the dance, but her getting ready and going and all of those things. And completely organically, as Autumn is getting ready, my sister calls. And she says this line to Autumn. It's actually one of the first scenes in the movie. She says to Autumn, "Do you know what mommy's going to do when you go to dance?" She said, "I'm going to go to my bed. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to think about you." And hearing that and then seeing Autumn's reaction changed everything for me. I knew that I needed to try and tell this story. That was the moment that this became a film. That was the moment that I became a filmmaker. And I said, I'm going to share this story. I'm going to figure out a way to tell this story. And I did. I quit everything else in my life and I dedicated it to learning how to become the best filmmaker that I could be, so that I could share this story. And that's really where this all came from, because leading up to that, as I was learning about what happened in my sister's case and in her sentence, I started to realize that, yes, my sister went away for this many years and was going away for 15 years. And I was learning that she wasn't the only one, that there were so many other people serving these long mandatory minimum sentences. And I started to think about the children. And when I saw that look on my niece's face, I multiplied that look by the thousands of other kids who were going through the same thing. And something in me said, you have to do this. You have to share this story.
Were any family members apprehensive about being a part of this?
That's a great question, because that leads to a little bit of insight on me, because the funny thing is, this isn't my family's first rodeo with me sort of talking about what we've gone through. You know, prior to this, being a filmmaker and sort of my life before all this, I was an actor and a writer, and I wrote a one-man show completely about my family and all the things that happened to them prior to even what happened in my sister's case. You know, we've had a pretty trying experience as a family. And so I wrote this one-man show that I only intended on ever performing twice. One was going to be sort of a dress rehearsal, and the second was going to be sort of the full production that I would invite my family to, because it was really a love letter to them, you know, breaking down all of the different characters in my life and then ending with me sort of talking about how I'm the sum of all of their parts, and I'm going to take all the things that we've gone through as a family and try to make something good out of all of it. So they loved the show. I ended up traveling for 2 years all around the country with that show and sharing it with a lot of different people. And so when I went to my family and said, I want to tell this story, they knew where my heart was and what I was trying to do. So there was no kickback. There was no I'm not sure about this. They knew that I wanted to try and take what was happening and make something good, make something for the greater good.
So the thing that was gnawing at my mind the whole time I was watching this movie was, the boyfriend had, the case was against her ex-boyfriend, had been brought again, they considered charging her, they didn't. And then they just arrest her 6 years later. Do you have any idea why the prosecutors waited 6 years to charge her and just bring this back up out of nowhere?
Yeah, so I don't have all of the sort of intimate details of why the prosecution came back, but one of the things that I do know, going through the trial and going through what happened through that trial and ultimately the sentence is, when this all first happened, this was all sort of sparked by the murder of her ex-boyfriend. When he was murdered, I believe it was something like 26 people were sent away almost immediately. A lot of people were giving information on different people, and they didn't charge my sister and another gentleman because there didn't seem to be much information about the two of them because they weren't really involved in what was happening. So you take these 26 people and you send them away for sentences of 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years or whatever, and you allow them to go to prison for a few years, and then you go back to them and say, now do you have any information on Cindy or this other gentleman, because we may be able to lessen your sentence if you do. I don't know what the motives were of the prosecutors, why they felt so strongly that Cindy needed to be taken off the streets. One of the things that I say sometimes in panels and talkbacks is the prosecution actually wanted 89 years for Cindy. 15 years was the mandatory minimum, and I never fully understood why they would go after somebody like my sister or anybody for that matter with such such a penalty, such a heavy-handed penalty, laying it down. So that was the understanding of why they came later. They had the ability to go after her. They wanted to sort of close off the loose ends of the other two people who weren't indicted. And, the other gentleman also got upwards of, I think, 25 years.
Was there any hesitation by the judge? I know he had to sentence her to 15 years at least. But was there any, sometimes judges express disdain that they have to do that. Was there anything like that with that judge?
Yeah, it was interesting. To be honest, that day is something that in a weird way is very vivid in my mind in the actions of what happened. The details I think I've blocked out in a weird way. I do remember him saying something along the lines of "my hands are tied," but I don't know what he was feeling on that day. I didn't fully understand why he needed to sentence her to 15 years that day. I now realize that he was sort of following the guidelines. What I will say, and I don't want to speak for him because I don't know him and I don't know his heart, but after he retired, he immediately wrote an op-ed about delivering down these long sentences and how he always felt bad about that and how he wished there was another way. So, I'd like to think that he would have liked to have given her a lesser sentence, but, I can't speak to what was in his heart or what was at his disposal at the time.
So there's another thing that I saw in the movie. I think it's I heard it a couple times throughout the movie, and then I heard it when she got out, and I heard Cindy calling you Mel or Melly.
Yeah.
What was that about?
So yeah, I actually get that question a lot, and it's funny because I'll run into people that I don't know that recognize me from the film, and they'll say, "Hey Melly, hey Melly, hey Mel," and I'm always like, "How do you know to call me that?" Oh yeah, there's an entire movie. So basically, it started with I'm her stinky brother, I'm her smelly brother, and so it was like stinky, smelly, Melly, Mel. And then if you pay close attention, I think there are a couple instances in the film where I call her Mel or Melly, and that's because I'm the laziest person in the world with nicknames. If you give me a nickname, it becomes your nickname. So it can be very confusing. I think we took a lot of that out because it was very confusing with her saying, "Hey, Melly," and I'm like, "Hey, Melly." So we had to edit around some of the Mellys and Mels, but we did keep some of it in, and it is something that people often ask about.
So to bring this back around to Cindy, how has she been doing since she was released? How has she readjusted to everything?
It's interesting because in a weird way, Cindy kind of had this exceptional coming home. Coming home under the clemency was so joyous and this, 1 in a million shot. I don't know what the odds were, but she came home under that fanfare. And then shortly after that, I finished the film, and so she had this excitement of this possible film coming out. And then we, by some miracle, got into Sundance, and then, won the audience award at Sundance, got picked up by HBO. We've been on this tour. So she's had this real extended honeymoon, and all of that is besides the fact that for the past couple of years since Sundance, and even a little bit before that, we have been on this sort of impact tour as well, trying to help, shape laws and really go and help make change with what we witnessed in the film. So she's had this wonderful experience of being able to go and give back and share her experiences and see that what she went through wasn't going to be in vain. So, in some respects, I think that's helping with a lot of the healing. But now that the film is sort of winding down in its, in the fanfare or in it being in the ether where everyone's watching it, she's just now starting to really sit down and look at life, and I think that for anyone, that's difficult, after spending that much time away and now looking at life and saying, now I rebuild and I move forward. But I will say she's doing amazing. She got a job almost immediately after coming home. She's been promoted, I think, 5 times at her job, and she is spending a lot of time with her daughters. And she doesn't like to say she's making up for lost time, because she isn't a big fan of looking back when it comes to her, but she's creating new memories and new traditions, and a future is what she focuses on. So in the grand scheme of things, she's doing well, but it's a new fight. Coming home from prison for anybody is a new fight. Reconnecting with family members and children is a new fight. And it's one that we're happy to have, but we're not taking it lightly.
So one other thing, to bring this to the broader idea of criminal justice reform, which you've been a very big champion of over these years. We did under a couple months ago, we got an aspect of criminal justice reform signed into law by President Trump. Do you have any optimism for further advances in reforming our criminal justice system under the current president?
That's a wonderful question. I love that, because I do. I'm extremely optimistic, and I think that has less to do with who our president is, but more with where I think the general feeling about criminal justice is within our country. When the film came out and we released it, one of the first panels I went through, they were saying, "Oh, too bad you're releasing this under the Trump administration." And I thought to myself, maybe I could have held on to the film and waited 4 more years or 8 more years to try and use it as an advocacy piece. Maybe I could have tried to time it so that it came out at a different time. But, to me, the right time to fight for change and what's right is now. And there was never, I'm never going to say, well, look, there's this thing up here that is a big obstacle, so I'm going to just wait and figure out when the right time to release is. No, it's like, I'm going to release this now. I'm going to fight now. I'm going to fight for change now, because I think that, in all honesty, it's bigger than the president. It's bigger than politics. It's bigger than any one politician. It's bigger than any one movie. I think that true criminal justice reform, in the way I would at least like to see it, is more than a political change or a legal change, but it's a change in our society. It's a cultural shift that we need to have, in the sense that we can no longer be okay with our brothers and sisters and our mothers and fathers and our sons and daughters being put into these prisons and caged up for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And what's worse, allowing people to profit off of that. I think that there are a lot of things in our culture that need to realize that and change that. So it's always the right time to fight for what's right.
And I also have to ask, so you did get nominated, the film got nominated for the Emmy for Merit in Documentary Filmmaking. What was that like when you found that out?
I mean, to be honest with you, every bit of this journey with this film has been unbelievably surreal. Thinking about the process of making this film, one of the things I'm most proud of, as a filmmaker, first of all, being able to call myself a filmmaker. I started this film because I wanted to give my sister a voice. I started this film because for so long in my life, I felt like I didn't have a voice. And people have often asked me, do you think you were too close to the subject matter to make this film? And I say, no. I encourage people who are this close to the subject matter to make this film. It's about owning your voice. And, when I tell you I dedicated my life to having a voice and giving a voice to others, like this film is everything that I worked for. It was about empowering myself, empowering my sister, empowering my family, and getting that out there for the greater good. So to be able to premiere at Sundance, to be able to be on HBO, to be able to be nominated for an Emmy, I mean, I can't even put it into words, like what that means. It's wonderful to be in these conversations, and it's amazing, and it will hopefully allow me to continue to tell stories. But on another level, I'm just happy and I'm proud of this film, and I'm proud of the impact that it made, and I'm proud that it's changing people's minds and hearts, and we've been a voice within all of this change that's currently happening. So the entire thing is completely surreal. Both the awards, the premieres, the impact on the laws, like everything has been, more than I could have imagined.
Well, thank you so much, Rudy, for talking with us. And to all our viewers, go to goldderby.com to make your predictions about who you think will be taking home the gold at this year's Emmys, and see if you can outsmart the smartest prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks again, Rudy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.